Okay, let's get going because we have a lot to talk about and we definitely don't want to miss an opportunity to spend as much time as possible with Council President Bass. As I said to a few of the folks when we were getting on the call, happy Friday. But then I would say, but is it really Friday? Because I can't quite tell or distinguish day, Monday through Friday or any other day of the week. But I hope you all are well and healthy and about to enjoy what looks like maybe a very nice weekend. So wonderful to see everybody this morning. I'm Barb Leslie, the President and CEO of the Oakland Chamber of Commerce, and we are continuing, as we always do, our Inside Oakland series for 2021. We welcomed, we're actually been asking our council members to come and participate with us, and we are very, very happy to have newly elected Council President Bass to be with us today. She will be introduced in a moment by Rick DeSilva with the Chinatown Chamber, but I did want to just do a shout out to our partners, our chamber partners who are on the call with us, and then the ones that I think will be joining shortly. I see Kathy Adams has joined us this morning. Thank you, Kathy, for being here. We've got Jessica Chen also from the Chinatown Chamber here as well, along with Rick. And I know Jen will probably be joining us soon with the Vietnamese Chamber, and I'm looking to see if Joe Partita has joined. I don't see him yet, but we will acknowledge him when he arrives. The chambers work together on a host of issues and have been for many, many years, and clearly more specifically this last year in support of our businesses that have been businesses and residents of Oakland and members of our community that have been so deeply in need of services and support. So we like to say we are 5 chambers and 1 Oakland, and we think that's a really important message for everybody to hear. I'm going to now turn it over because, again, we want to spend more time, as much time as possible with the council president, to Rick DeSilva, who is with obviously the Chinatown Chamber, a longtime Oakland leader, partner, and all around good human. So I'm very happy to be introducing Rick today, and thank you for joining us and taking on this role. Rick? Oh, Rick. Rick was frozen there for a second. Can anybody see Rick right now? The joys of Zoom. Anybody tired of it? Oh, there's Rick. Yay. I'm
sorry about that. I tested my connection this morning too with Tashawn, and of course, as soon as it.
That's okay. It's the real world.
It's the new real world.
Passing it over to Rick.
Okay, great. Well, thank you everybody for being here this morning. It is an honor and a privilege to introduce our speaker this morning. I think these events that the Chamber is hosting, the Inside Oakland events, are very important, and it gives us an opportunity to really speak on a more intimate basis and a one-on-one basis with our leaders about what's happening in our very dynamic and diverse city. This morning, we'd like to welcome Council President Nikki Fortunato Bass, who has been the District 2 council member for the past 2 years and was just elected this year to be council president. And Council members Bass's district also includes Oakland Chinatown. So we're grateful for her partnership in our community, and especially with what's going on lately, her very visible presence and very sincere concern with helping heal what's going on. And working with us to come up with thoughtful solutions that really address the concerns of the many stakeholders that live and work in and about Chinatown. So without further ado, I know we have limited time, and I want to make sure that Council President Bass has an opportunity to speak to us and that we have an opportunity to ask her questions. I will pass this off to you, Council President Bass.
Thank you, Rick. Thank you, Barb. It's good to see all of you this morning. Good morning. I really appreciate having this opportunity to speak with the Chamber again, and appreciate all of you joining this dialogue early on a Friday. So I wanted to just briefly share some of my priorities, and I shared some of this at our first meeting in January, but really want to have a chance to have a dialogue with you all about what you care about, what you're seeing here in Oakland, what you think we can do to really move forward. So just to get us started, as we all know, there's so much at stake here in Oakland. We've been in this shelter in place in this pandemic for almost a whole year. It's incredibly hard to believe, but here we are. And I think all of us have observed that the pandemic and the resulting recession have really deepened the inequality that's been caused by years of disinvestment at every level of government, really. And so it's really important for me personally, as well as I think for many of you, to make sure that our most vulnerable residents don't continue to suffer, but can really recover as we move forward. And that's our unsheltered residents, our essential workers, our BIPOC community, and of course, our small businesses and our entire business community. So as many of you know, over the past 2 years, I have been working to champion the needs of our most vulnerable workers and residents, small businesses. And there are 3 priorities that I focused on, which are continuing over the next 2 years. The first is to ensure a just recovery in Oakland. And that means that the people most in need of our investment receive our support. I really want to engage all of you in terms of what that means for our small businesses. I know many have already been impacted and you all have really stepped up to find solutions. So that's something in particular I want to discuss with all of you. Secondly, I will continue to advance housing as a human right, and that means preventing displacement of our low-income residents and people of color, and making sure that we're creating housing for our unsheltered residents. I think many of us are seeing very visibly that encampments are continuing to grow, and we really do need to invest and be more creative about how we shelter unhoused people. And then thirdly, we have to make sure our budget continues to reflect our values. So as you all know, we are going to be working on updating our corporate business tax to make it more progressive and equitable. Our task force to really dive into those issues will be meeting very soon, and I'm happy to talk about that more. Secondly, our work to reimagine public safety is continuing. Some of you may have seen the draft recommendations that have been brought forward from our advisory boards. The task force is going to be wrestling with those and then bringing forward their recommendations to council in April. And in terms of reimagining safety, I also want to be clear that all of you know that for the task force that's reimagining safety, as well as for me, the goal is really to focus our resources on violent crime, to really improve safety across the city, to make safety more equitable. And as we do that, reallocate resources to the things that we call on police officers to do that they may not be the best suited to do. So mental health is one particular issue, many traffic stops, homelessness. There's a number of things that we think we can divert to other responders so that our police can focus on violent and serious crime. And then also in regards to our budget, the services that we deliver to our neighborhoods are so important, keeping our streets clean and safe, having our parks well maintained, maintaining programs as we're able to reopen, supporting our small business community as well as our arts community. As we look at this year's budget, I want to really make sure that we are able to continue a high level of service, knowing that we have some hard decisions to make. And then, of course, as all of this moves forward, there's a set of values that are really important to me, which I know many of you share. And those values include equity, inclusion, democracy, really making sure that the decisions the council makes are done in an open and transparent way, that we're allowing for community input. And then in particular, in my role as council president, and I'll be working on this as we have our council retreat at the end of March, I really want to bring forward an opportunity for the council to work in a more united fashion, to have a clearer set of priorities as a body, and also to make sure that we're working more effectively with other branches of government. I know it's not going to be easy to do, but I think it's what we owe the people of Oakland so that we're creating a safer, healthier, and more vibrant Oakland as we recover from this pandemic and we move forward. So I hope that gives you a sense of my work, and more than anything, I really want to have a dialogue with all of you.
Thank you, Council President. And for those of you who didn't see Barb's message in the chat box, any questions that we have for the Council President should be placed in the chat and they'll be forwarded to us. Otherwise, you can also raise your hand and we will call on folks. Let me see if I don't think I've gotten anything yet. So maybe we can start the conversation a little bit as well. Let's see if
Rick, I have a question.
Okay, go ahead.
I'll kick it off. And I'll ease you into it. I won't ask business license tax right out of the gate, Council President Bass. I was watching the news this morning, and the House will be passing the 1.9 stimulus bill this morning, and it's going to the Senate obviously in the next few days. They need to pass it by that March 14th date, as to not lose any opportunities to continue unemployment benefits for our obviously our people who need them the most. There's 177 million in that, from what I understand, for Oakland. Could you talk a little bit about how you're going to balance the budget deficit with that 177 million, and also how you're going to sort of ensure our rainy day fund, which I believe has been pretty reduced, and just sort of our fiscal prudence going forward?
Thanks, Barb. That's an excellent question. Well, firstly, I am so grateful that we have the White House back. I mean, that's kind of like night and day in terms of our ability to recover from this pandemic and the recession. So, you know, I think that we're going to be very thoughtful about how we use the stimulus funds that are coming forward. The good news is that unlike the last stimulus round, we will be able to use this as revenue replacement. So that gives us much more flexibility in terms of how we can allocate on the expense side of things. So, you know, we have a major finance committee meeting coming up on March 8th. We'll be looking at our Q2 revenue and expense report so that we will have a much better sense of what our revenue has been, where we are in terms of the current budget shortfall. And I think that will be really instructive for the council. I also had asked the city administrator to give the council information on some of the budget reductions that the department directors had proposed. So I think we'll have much more information than we've had in the past when we get to our March 8th Finance Committee meeting in terms of where our revenues have been, where they might be going. And I think we'll just have to make some really thoughtful decisions. The city did contract with Blue Sky Consulting, who'll be doing our 5-year revenue forecasts. I'm also working with Harvey Rose Associates, as we've done in years past. And I think what's really important for me is making sure that we're just incredibly thoughtful. We do really solid research, double check it to make sure we have a good picture of where we are right now, as well as what the 1-year, 2-year, 5-year forecast will be, so that we can make good decisions about the stimulus funding in particular, but also on the expense side, how can we maintain a good level of service, but also really set ourselves up for a good recovery. And, you know, there's some small things and perhaps some big things that I want to be looking at, you know, as we are talking with our business community. A lot of businesses are asking, you know, can we continue having these parklets outside? You know, outdoor dining will really have to continue. So that's something I'm committed to working with OakDOT on. And then, you know, I'm Isaac, you're like right next to me in my Brady Bunch screen, and I know you live at the lake and you're on the Parks and Rec Commission. We also have to look at how are people using our public parks. And, you know, I want to figure out how we use some of our budget to continue to allow for supporting our staff to do outdoor programming, because people need to be able to use our parks, and without creating some structure and some, you know, some some ways for people to do that in a way that is safe and healthy and responsible, it has these very difficult challenges for our community. So I'll also be looking at how we do this year's program at the lake, but really with an eye towards making it sustainable and also potentially replicating how we use our park space across the city, because we'll have to do that. So the short answer, Barb, is that, I'm wanting to be incredibly thoughtful and thorough as we work on this budget. As the council president, I'll be leading the council's amendments to the mayor's proposed budget. And I think it's just really important for us to do even more with the constraints of Zoom, to engage people through budget town halls, as well as to use our resources, our staff, Blue Sky, who the city is contracting with, Harvey Rose, who will be working with the council offices to get as much information as possible about what our financial choices are. And then, this Tuesday's council meeting, we are going to hear the results of our biennial budget poll. So that will be interesting to all of you to hear what Oaklanders think in terms of priorities. But in addition to that, I want to make sure we're reaching out to specific neighborhoods. Chinatown and Eastlake are important to me in terms of our Chinese speaking and Vietnamese community, our small business community through working with you. There's a lot of different stakeholders we really have to hear from as we make choices about the service delivery we can manage in this 2-year budget.
Thank you.
Sorry, my internet is apparently unstable, so I'm trying to fix that. I do see some questions coming into the chat now, and to Sean, is it okay if I just pull them off the chat?
Absolutely.
Okay, great. I think Barb mentioned that we will hold off a little bit on the business license tax till a little bit towards the end of this Q&A. And we'll try to talk a little more about what's happening on other issues. And thank you, Councilmember Bass. I know there's some big cuts that are going to come, and it's just a reality, and that all of us are going to feel some of it. So I know the council's in a tough spot as you decide what cuts are going to happen where and who's going to be impacted and the extent of that impact. Maybe we can talk a little bit also, you mentioned about the public safety issue, and I know you've been very active in the reimagining public safety. I think the task force is working on things, and where we are seeing some issues happening in our community. Can you speak a little bit about that and where you see that going right now?
Sure. We do have a set of recommendations that our advisory board has put forward. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the Reimagining Public Safety Task Force, the council unanimously created this task force back in July after passing our mid-cycle budget. And it was seated in September and has since been working on a set of recommendations that would do 3 things: improve public safety across our neighborhoods, recommend alternative responses to policing for things that are nonviolent and non-criminal, and then thirdly, make a set of recommendations to invest in solutions that get at the root causes of crime and poverty. And all of that is sort of in the confines of working towards the goal of significantly reducing Oakland's general fund expenditures to policing by 50%. It's a very ambitious goal, and I think we're also realistic about how much we can do in this budget cycle versus over a longer period of time. And in addition to the 17 task force members, there are 5 advisory boards and 130 amazing volunteers who've been participating, doing research, contributing their experience. So the recommendations are very robust, and Mia, my chief of staff, is on. So Mia, maybe you can put into the chat the link to the task force recommendations if people want to see it. I think there's a few areas where we could potentially consider changes to our public safety system to make it more equitable. And that includes a set of recommendations that I believe will focus resources on violent crime and shift certain things so that we can have a little bit more equity. So for example, there's been a lot of attention, including from transportation professionals, many of whom are working with the city of Oakland around reducing police involvement in minor traffic issues, illegal parking, things that may not jeopardize the health and safety of our residents. And so there's a proposal to move some of those traffic issues from police to the Department of Transportation. And you might have seen that Berkeley took some steps towards this week. So that's one set of issues that we think will reduce some of the racial inequities in terms of police stops that are due to traffic, and then create some cost savings over time. There's another recommendation that's also along the lines of civilianization, moving internal affairs investigation out of the police department into our community police advisory agency. So those type of things that sort of civilianize positions, I think are really important to look at. There's also a set of recommendations that look at alternative responses to policing. And some of you may have already heard, because Oakland has been talking about it for a long period of time, developing a program which we're calling Macro, which would provide EMTs and counselors to respond to mental health issues when 911 is called versus sworn police officers. So that's something we're really hoping to get off the ground soon. There's also some issues that create alternatives like community safety ambassadors. There's a program that I know Rick is very familiar with in Chinatown that we could eventually invest in and perhaps transition over to the community benefits district when that's up and running. And then at places like the lake, I think there's a lot of interest, and I certainly support having something similar to park rangers, but really kind of updating that concept and idea so that there are some civilian positions that would help to ensure appropriate and equitable use of our parks. So those are some of the things that we're looking at. And again, I think it's important to note that, for the task force, as well as for me, this is about improving safety so that it's equitable across our neighborhoods. As many of you know, some of our East Oakland neighborhoods who've been so impacted by gun violence feel underserved. There's also communities who feel over-policed, and so we have to figure out how we make some real adjustments to address that. And then representing Chinatown and Eastlake, and I think this is also true for the Fruitvale, I think it's really important for us to be very mindful of what type of policing resources will be culturally and linguistically appropriate. We have to make sure that for our limited English or monolingual communities, that there are safety resources that people trust and that are accessible.
That's great, thank you. I mean, we are all concerned about public safety right now, and so this is a very important topic and a relevant topic. There are two questions I do want to get to. One, actually, I just want to acknowledge Isaac. I know you had a question and that you wanted to, since you've been called on, and I'm always happy to call on a Chinatown Chamber member with a good question. So Isaac, would you like to pose your question in regards to the lake and city services
Sure.
there? Something specific.
Thank you, Rick. And I appreciate the reference to the lake. Obviously, big fan. I think it might win the award for the most popular Zoom background in Oakland. But my question is actually, it drives toward the lake, but really applies to almost everything that I work on in the city. The city is struggling sometimes to deliver on basic services effectively at multiple levels, from cleaning up to approving permits to reviewing things effectively to working remotely during a pandemic, which, it certainly has not made it easier. And as much as we talk about reimagining public safety, I think there needs to be a broader discussion about reimagining public services, because to talk effectively about raising more money from businesses, which, I've probably voted for every tax increase that's ever been presented before me in Oakland. But there comes a point when you say, let me see, our schools aren't open. I can't get anything approved through multiple agencies where that's their sole job. We've proposed multiple solutions to all these problems, and the only answer is we just need more money. So I know it's a broad and tough question, but I do think it's important to throw that out there.
Mhm.
Would love your thoughts.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, Isaac. The answer isn't always we need more money. I do think that we do need more investment, but I think you're right. I mean, we need to use our resources more effectively. I mean, that's been my approach to reimagining public safety. Um, when you look at the data, for example, we have more officers today than we did in 2012 when our homicide rate was the highest. And so does that point to certain ways that we have been providing public safety where we should be more effective? I certainly have had a number of conversations with the business community about planning and building, for instance. And there are particular departments where I think that the council as a body is really interested in making sure that we're delivering more effective services. Planning and building keeps coming up over and over again from developers who just really need to get their permits and build. And we know that provides tax revenue to our city, to small businesses who just want to start up and need some resources. So there is an item coming to council on Tuesday to help to expedite using our development service fund dollars. And that's a dedicated funding stream that has a balance of over 100 million. So unlike our general fund, this particular fund is flush. And, it's an opportunity for the council to really work with the administration and say, okay, we're under-resourced in our planning and building department. Let's really expedite filling those positions so that we can deliver those particular services. And, we're doing our council retreat at the end of March. Right now, it's just one day. I think we might need several days. My hope, because we do this with the administration, the city administrator, the clerk, the mayor's office, is that could be a forum for us to have a little bit more of this conversation of delivering effective service. So, if you all have specific ideas of what we can focus on, let me know. The things I think I'm most concerned about are planning and building services, litter and illegal dumping, pickup, street sweeping. Those are among the things that we have been talking about and really trying to understand how are those services delivered and can we do better? If there's other things on the list, let me know, because we are trying to dig into those things and we've asked the administration to give us informational reports to really understand. Just on the issue of litter pickup, for example, working with the Clinton Park community, there's limits to how often our public works workers will pick up litter in the park, and then waste management is responsible for more of the streets and sidewalks, and there's issues there. We have a program that some of our corner stores and liquor stores pay into. It's an excess litter fee, and so there's a fleet that serves the city. And in District 2, and each council member can do this, we're trying to direct where we can have additional litter pickup through that service to supplement what the city and Waste Management and California Waste Solutions do. So we are trying to work more closely with our communities. And for those of you who live in other districts, definitely be in touch with your council member, because that is sort of a newer partnership that has come out of this conversation of services, where the excess litter fleet is working with each council office to identify monthly, okay, where are the places we can be more dedicated to picking up litter?
Hey, Nikki, I want to respond on that permit comment just really quickly, because I think my chamber peers would probably agree that that's probably the single biggest call and an issue I deal with on any given day for any given member of our bid community our small business community, the developers in our community, of which pretty much all are members of the chamber. And so we spend an inordinate amount of time talking about this. A couple things that I can recommend that have been recommended previously. Many people who have been around a long time talk about the effectiveness of the one-stop permitting centers that were stood up after the fire and the earthquake specifically, and that those were very efficient because all of the signers were in the same room. So to the extent part of the problem is that your approval process jumps departments, and that makes it very hard for things just that slow down. I mean, we can almost pinpoint exactly what department at what point in time things are slowing down. So we're happy to share that information with you more specifically. But one of the things that came out of the small business task force that we participated in, as well as many people on this call a few years ago, was pick the #1 permit that is issued in Oakland and get it online and make it an administrative process, and find out how long it takes to approve that permit in Oakland versus how long it takes to approve that permit in other jurisdictions. I mean, some of this stuff is really administrative and pretty perfunctory, and it slows everything down. So I would say wherever that recommendation went, I would love to see it pop back up. And the other thing is if you talk to any developer or anybody who spends a lot of time in permitting or in planning, they know the planners that are more inclined to get to yes. And so there needs to be a set of standards on the planner side that says the goal here is to get to yes within the confines of the law and the regulatory environment and all the frameworks, but the goal is to get to yes. And I'm not entirely sure everybody embraces that. So to the extent that we can help continue to provide feedback, I mean, as you can tell, we have a lot, and I could spend the rest of the time talking about it, and we'd be happy to help in any resolution around that.
That's great. I mean, I think that because you all have been so vocal, there's a lot of traction here. We talked about this at our Community Economic Development Committee last Tuesday. So the city has launched a 45-member interagency working group in November focused on permitting. And this complements the proposal I mentioned coming to council on Tuesday, which is to unfreeze positions that are in our planning and building department that are funded through dedicated restricted resources. So, I think this is probably one thing that the city can do that will improve things. There are a handful of examples of the city working cross-department, and this working group around permitting is one example that's a little bit newer, and I think it would be good to really make sure that you all are engaged in that. Around lake issues, a year ago in February, I convened with then city administrator. This started in when I started in 2019 with Sabrina Landreth. But anyway, the city administrator has worked with me to convene a working group on Lake Merritt, which Joe DeVries is the head of. And I have seen that on certain issues where the city is able to work cross-department, it has been more effective because they literally, and I joined these meetings, they have standing meetings that bring 5, 6, 7 departments together and kind of talk through issues. And it's a much better forum than other ways that they may have been working to really dig into things and problem solve. And I think at the end of the day, what I'm trying to get better at, and I think I want to, ensure that my tenure over the next 2 years as council president helps to make progress on this, is how do we balance some of the policy making and priority setting at the council level with working with the administration on the implementation side and more of the problem solving, because ultimately what we're trying to do here is problem solve. And we need to really find that balance between the council setting direction and the administration effectively implementing that direction. And I hope that some of these interagency working groups will make progress.
I think this is the one that Jason Mitchell is involved in from the city.
That's right.
I've had a lot of conversations with Jason about this very subject.
Yeah.
So thank you, I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I mean, we see a lot of policy coming out of council, and sometimes it's hard to implement. So it'll be great to get more cooperation. I think, as you said, Council President, between the council and maybe the administrative staff on some of these issues. I know I'm trying to be mindful of time, and there's a couple of things that we definitely want to touch on. And I know, Mia, you commented a little bit about the macro situation, but maybe very quickly, Council President, can you comment on what your thoughts are about macro, and now that it's going back and it looks like the backs thing isn't happening. And I saw, Mia, you commented that maybe it should be brought in internally, which I think is an interesting idea. Can you give us a couple of just quick comments about that, Nikki?
Sure. I think people might be familiar with where things are. There was a proposal that the staff brought forward to contract with BACS to implement the macro pilot for 18 months. And, at the Public Safety Committee meeting, there was some conversation and some interest in the second organization, La Familia. And so from that meeting, I had called actually a special meeting to consider both of those organizations last Thursday. And unfortunately, the morning of that meeting, they withdrew. And so we're in a challenging situation where we no longer have the contractors who applied to lead that program in the running. So we will be looking at some options on Tuesday. And one of those options is something that the council had discussed back in December, which is bringing the program in-house. And I see that, Carolee, you have a question here. So BACS, La Familia, as well as BOSS, the top 3 contractors, withdrew their applications. So Mia and I have been looking at what other cities across the country are doing. In addition to the local reimagining task force, I'm also participating in the National League of Cities National Task Force around reimagining. And it's been really interesting. There's similar programs in Philly, Olympia, Albuquerque, Portland, Phoenix, San Francisco, many, many places. So as I've been learning about what other cities are doing, there's some similar models I think we can look at, looking at San Francisco and Portland, for example, who have either identified putting the program under their fire department or creating some kind of emergency management department where these type of programs can run. And at the most basic level, these programs are emergency medical technicians who are complemented with behavioral health counselors. So they are part of the dispatch system in their cities. And when someone calls 911 and they identify it's a nonviolent mental health crisis, then these alternative responders will be deployed instead of police. And many, many cities have found that it has been really effective in servicing those particular calls. In Eugene, where this was piloted, they have documented saving millions of dollars by doing this. And so, we are going to be talking with the administration about what are the steps that we can take to bring such a program in-house. So there's, a question on the table about the fire department housing this. And then from there, what would the new positions look like? But most of these programs have an EMT and a counselor. And I think that's what the city of Oakland has been looking at. And this is also, I think, another area where, just knowing the constraints of the city budget where we could potentially get private funding. I was on a call with someone from Los Angeles, and the MacArthur Foundation invested in their program. In San Francisco, the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation invested in their program. So I think it's also an opportunity to bring in some outside resources to pilot this program, get it up and running, and really test the strategy. But I think what's important for us to know is that there are many, many cities around the country who've had these type of programs for a number of years. And so there's a lot we can learn from.
Thanks, Nikki. Looks like Rick was frozen again, and I'm going to ask him afterwards if he froze on purpose, because now I'm going to ask the business license tax issue. As most people on this call know, Council President Bass has brought forward a business license tax measure to raise taxes on most businesses in Oakland, and we share a different opinion on possibly how to get there. So, and I really appreciate you being open to have a conversation with us, and you have been really, I appreciate that you have been open through the process with us and hearing from the members of our community. Can you talk a little bit about your, what you hope to get out of it? I mean, we are obviously a little bit concerned. The council made this motion back last July, and the task force hasn't started meeting yet, and you have sort of a hard stop because of the changes that you will need to make to your systems going forward. And so we really want to be able to have a conversation that is robust, data-driven, and informative. So I'm going to toss it to you. This is not the first time we've talked about this, obviously, for everybody involved. Yeah.
Right. So the Blue Ribbon Task Force is being seated. I think some of you know that the task force members were nominated by each elected official, each council member, plus the mayor. And there were 2 appointments that we made through the resolution. So it is an 11-member task force. And the finance department is going to be facilitating the task force in partnership with economic and workforce development. So they have been reaching out to the appointees, and I believe the first meeting is going to be the 2nd week in March. You know, we constructed the resolution to create the task force with a set of criteria to have diverse representation from the business community, and then also laid out a number of the research questions. You know, the goals of creating an update to our business tax include making the tax structure more equitable and having a progressive rate versus a flat rate. Really looking at how we can provide some relief to small businesses, looking at how we can create living wage jobs and continue supporting a vibrant economy. Those are some of the basics, in addition to revenue enhancement, of course. So they're getting off the ground. I think it's also important to note that in addition to the task force, there will also potentially be advisory boards or ad hoc meetings. You know, I just talked with our finance director yesterday and really encouraged her to work with the task force to think about, are there specific sectors we need to really convene in order to get as much information as possible? For example, utilities, just because they're publicly regulated and costs can get passed down to customers. I think utilities would be an interesting work group to convene. Administrative headquarters might be another interesting work group to convene. You know, there could be more convenings around small businesses because we're in this transition from the pandemic into hopefully an economic recovery, and what do we need to be mindful of in terms of providing relief. And then just zooming out a little bit, Blue Sky Consulting, who's doing our 5-year financial forecast, they're also on tap to support the task force. And I've had this conversation with some of you. I think there's also an opportunity here, and you know, Barb, you're also a port commissioner. There's also an opportunity here to think about, can the rate setting and the update of our business tax also be paired with some incentives to grow particular industries in Oakland? There's a number of council members who are really interested in, you know, in port-related industries, you know, industrial lands that we could develop all along the 880 corridor, along Fruitvale and the BRT. So I think there's also potentially some really specific conversations that could be had to really get everyone's feedback around how this isn't just a tax update, but it can really be paired with economic and workforce development. And certainly if you all have ideas about what that could look like in terms of a work group or a set of conversations, especially as it points to economic and workforce development, I think that's something that I would be interested in particular, because I want to figure out how this also gets paired with a just recovery.
Yeah, thank you for that. I think that's really important, and clearly the collective we, and that includes sort of every participant, really need to focus on an industrial lands policy in Oakland. It's something we've been talking about for a long time, and we haven't done it yet. And I think we're missing an opportunity to really be strategic about how we attract businesses or grow the businesses we have here. I mean, food manufacturing has long been a focus, it's had its moments of tremendous attention and then sort of less attention over the years, but we've got some pretty significant food manufacturing here, light industrial. I mean, the things that are consistent with your objectives as a city. And then to pair them with obviously workforce opportunities. I mean, obviously the chamber participates pretty deeply in the workforce space. We actually house or host two sector strategy programs to create pipelines in trade and logistics, obviously, and technology. And I think it's really important to look at sort of the synergistic businesses that can be created and grown that build upon the industries that we have here. I mean, obviously we're blessed with a very robust healthcare industry.
Right.
And obviously the port is a huge economic engine, as we know. So thank you for that. I think,
Sure. You might know that Michael Katz was appointed via resolution to the task force. And so he brings some workforce development expertise and convenes a few tables in the East Bay. So I think that might be helpful.
We know Michael well. I've known him for a long time. So yes, that would be great. I think for us, it's really just about creating the balance that allows jobs to continue to grow. I think that's what we're most concerned about, is the economic ecosystem that is so important. And what I worry about even more is this sort of synergy around the sort of increase in crime, because there's just been less people around, right? Like there's this vibrancy that's created by a lot of employment in downtown. Like that's what we really want to see come back. And so, we obviously will be paying very close attention. There will be things that we will continue to disagree on, but we really appreciate your openness, and we will continue to advocate for the interests of the business community. And I don't know if any of my peers want to add into that. I see Kathy's on, and Jessica and Rick, but and I think Joe's also on, so thank you. Daniel, speaking for the big community as well.
Oh, Daniel's on the task force.
Ah, Daniel, there you go. Great. Okay, Rick. I turned back to you.
I think it's,
You were frozen.
Yeah, and I apologize for my terrible internet connection, which I promise everybody I did test before we started this morning. Tashawn can attest to that, but still is continuing to fail me. Nikki, I think we appreciate your listening to some of our small businesses as well, and trying to understand how the business license tax can affect different businesses in different ways. And so I just want to acknowledge that, when we came to you about some of the receipts components that affect some of the small businesses, particularly in Chinatown, that we are grateful that you take those types of things into consideration. And I don't know if any of the other smaller ethnic chambers want to comment on that, but our small business constituents, we're hoping for a reform system. I think that goes without saying, and a fair system, but we want to look at that, the impacts maybe more specifically when we have that opportunity to do that with your office. So thank you. Sure. I'm not sure. And again, I know I disappeared for a little while there, but I had reset I'm actually on my phone now because my computer continues to fail me. So I know that we wanted to talk about some of the business license, and it sounds like we've done that. I know we talked a little bit about business attraction and growth industries. And Barb, you touched on that. I'm not sure if while I was gone, we talked about what we're going to do for business retention and really giving assistance to the small businesses that are suffering right now for many of the reasons that we talked about on today's call. I mean, a lot of different COVID related and circumstantial related businesses. But as we prepare to come out of this, and I think we're all starting to see a light at the end of the tunnel, like how is Oakland going to position itself to be on the forefront of a recovery, and what our city leadership do to really help prepare our communities to come out quickly and in as healthy a way as we can.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that's an excellent question. You know, for me, some of it ties to work at the state and county level in terms of how we are vaccinating people, right? So, you know, I've tried to weigh in with the governor and our state public health officials in terms of prioritizing educators and school site workers, for example, so that we can at least do that part of getting to reopening our schools. You know, honestly, this is an area where I want to do more listening. You know, again, from walking and talking with some of the District 2 businesses, being able to maintain the outdoor dining space and just really continuing to think about how do we longer term continue to have businesses outdoors is really important. You know, I continue to be really interested in you know, Rick, we've had conversations, and Jessica too, before COVID around potential nighttime markets. And I think Leslie, Barb, you made a really good point. You know, if we have more people out walking, out shopping, out dining in our business community, it has so many positive effects, from supporting our economy and our workers to public safety. So, and I see the comment about Fruitvale. So, you know, for me, so much of this is about how do we use our parks and our business districts, and as a city really support creating a sense of vibrancy and safety and programming. So, you know, I'd be really interested in hearing from you, like what might be needed from the council as our policy-making body, as our budgeting body, in order to support that. You know, I think there's going to be a lot of pent-up demand when more of us are vaccinated and we can be out and about. And so how do we support in our business districts as well as in our parks the physical aspects of being outside, as well as some of the programming and the permitting too where needed.
Right. And I let you know that we fully support you on reimagining all of this, and I look at it as reimagining public safety is also part of reimagining public spaces and reimagining a post-COVID world, and how do we put all those things together. So thank you for your comments on that. I know we are coming to close on our time now, and I want to be respectful of everybody's time. We have a few minutes left, and I want to make sure Barb has an opportunity to give her closing comments. But thank you, Councilmember Bass, and for your time. And you know, we want to support you in your role as council president. We appreciate all you're doing. And thank you, Mia, for your comments in the chat too. I think those are helpful. And those of you who haven't been paying attention or haven't looked at all of them, there's some great resources there and links that have been provided by the council member's office. Sorry, we were not able to get to everybody's questions, but know that we are looking at what's in the chat, and we would invite you to either, if you have unanswered questions, to reach out to the council president's office directly or to the Oakland Chamber, and we will forward those questions along. And at this point, I will pass it on to Barb for her closing comments.
Thanks, Rick. I do have one follow-up question, council member, if you don't mind. I'm assuming that not just parklets, but will DOT also be re-examining the safe streets, and will those, I mean, is there any potential of some of the safe streets permanently staying carless?
I think so. I mean, we're continuing to have conversations about whether, for example, on weekends, we close down part of Lakeshore, kind of thinking about how Golden Gate Park is used. So I think those conversations are really important. Yeah, Safe Streets is definitely on our radar. And yeah, I think this conversation has just been really helpful for me in terms of thinking through how we move some of these issues, which are all related to a just, vibrant recovery, how we move some of this through the council so that there's that public space for you all to participate in addition to work you might do directly with our departments.
Great, thank you.
And Mia and I are going to save this chat because there's a lot of great information here, as well as questions we might need to get back to you on.
Well, I was actually going to tee up. We thought maybe what we could do is send you the chat, and if
Thank you, that would be great.
If you wouldn't mind
Please
providing answers, what we can do is then post the answers near on our website near the actual recording, if that's helpful for folks, and also send the answers out to the people who've registered here today.
Great.
So, okay, so we will go ahead and do that.
Thank you.
It's 9:59. I didn't, when I did the intro, I just wanted, and I have talked to the council member about this, but I want to thank everybody who's on the call. You know, one of the great things about organizations like our chambers is that they represent such a really important cross section of Oakland. I mean, today we we have on the call obviously representatives from our multicultural chambers. We have representatives from small business. We have representatives from large business. We have representatives from our nonprofit community, which are so important in providing vital services to our residents. We also have business improvement districts that, you know, Daniel knows what proponents and champions the chamber is for our business improvement districts and the work you do on it really every day to support small businesses in your districts. And it's really, it's gratifying. League of Women Voters was also on the call. It's gratifying to see that everybody in the ecosystem is represented and can come together and have a discussion like this. So I feel really privileged to be part of an organization that allows us to do that. And Councilmember Bass, you know, I think we all have the same intention, which is a vibrant and beautiful and equitable Oakland. And although we may differ on slight strategies on how to get there, we all do have the same goal. And we really appreciate your time and your commitment to hearing this. And we will obviously continue this discussion in many different fronts. And please look to us as a resource going forward, as we will continue to be and have been independent chambers, as well as I said earlier in starting the conversation, 5 chambers, 1 Oakland, and we really believe that.
Terrific.
So it is 10:01, everyone. Have a beautiful weekend. Enjoy Oakland.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Have a great weekend.